You mentioned the part of your brain that tells you lies, that denies the truth.
Yeah.
That is the default mode network. So what is it? The default mode network is your ego. It is yourself. It is the storyline of you that you've been generating. And the way to recognize it is when your mind wanders away from the present moment. So it turns out our brain has at least 7 networks. So what is a network? A network is very simply different parts of the brain that connect to do a function.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to Neff Inspiration, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stephan, Neff. Today is a fantastic day for an interview, and I'm really looking forward to it because I've got Hosein Kouros-Mehr with me. He is a physician. He is an established author. He's a man with a strong creative streak, but he's also intensely curious. And when he realized that there are new developments within science that might actually help us to deal with this addictive trait, with the addictive craving, then he got very, very curious and started digging deep and then wrote about it in his book, Breakthrough. So I can't wait to have this great man on my show. Hosein, welcome to my show.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, we are always having a backstory here, isn't it? We as humans, there's always core beliefs, trauma, coping mechanisms that we are not so proud of, which lead us to become the men and the humans that we are. Here you are, have written a book about addictive cravings. How much was that part of your life prior to writing the book, prior to becoming so interested into the topic?
Absolutely. So this book, first of all, this is a book about personal growth. It's a book about self-discovery, and it centers around this default mode network, one of the brain's 7 networks, which we can talk about. We're living in a very exciting time because we're understanding how the brain works, and we're coming to a crossroads where science and medicine is meeting mental health and spirituality. It's all coming together with these new discoveries. Personally, I have in the past suffered from addictive craving, and 10 other knots, as I call them. I don't call them disorders or syndromes. I call them knots, like knots in a rope that you untie. And so one of them was addictive craving, which I managed to overcome mainly by understanding how my brain works and how a rewired brain can give rise to this addictive craving that can cause so much pain and suffering.
Wow. Okay, just like that. Bing. Yeah, I thought about it, and then bing. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Okay, let's go a bit more into detail here. First of all, what was your addictive craving? Was there one particular, or were there a few of them?
So growing up, I was an immigrant to the United States. I was born in Iran. A lot of expectations placed on me growing up to succeed, to be competitive, to beat others. And it took me down this lonely road. I was high performing and very successful, but suffering from not just addictive craving, but stress, anxiety, loneliness, emotional pain, and the other knots, which I'll talk about. My addictive craving was around the stock market, which is more of like a gambling addiction. And essentially what it was is pursuing addictive cravings as a way of managing my stress, my emotional pain, rather than dealing with the core issues, turning to, these addictions to cope. And so it wasn't an overnight process to resolve this. It took me 6 months. The beginning of the process, the first month, there was no recognizable change. But a month in, I started to see some shoots, some glimmers of hope, minutes of peace, and over time, over 6 months, the light grew and eventually, eliminated the darkness, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's so difficult for us because often enough, when we are in the darkness, there is no glimmer of light. Our knots in your case, or the issues of depression, of anxiety, of addiction, they tell us lies. There is no hope. No one could ever understand you. You're such a shame and to society. Who are you? All this negative talk that are essentially lies. But it's interesting that you say that after some time, you began to see a gentle transformation. And I think that is the reality for many of us. There is never a wow, great. And this transformation, in fact, I believe, continues for years and years and years afterwards, because the path of healing is so meandering. And whilst you have healed maybe from one bit of trauma, trauma comes in layers. Therefore, also the healing inevitably will come in layers. So welcome to the journey, Hosein. Welcome to the journey, brother. But of course, the default node network.
Yes.
I want to know more about it.
Aha.
You basically for many of the viewers, they have no clue what the hell we are talking about.
Yes.
So
Well, they may not know the term, but they know exactly what I'm talking about. You mentioned the part of your brain that tells you lies, that denies the truth.
yeah,
That is the default mode network. So what is it? It is the default mode network is your ego. It is yourself. It is the storyline of you that you've been generating. And the way to recognize it is when your mind wanders away from the present moment. So it turns out our brain has at least 7 networks. So what is a network? A network is very simply different parts of the brain that connect to do a function. So you've got the visual network, helps you see.
Yeah.
You've got the auditory network, it helps you hear. And then you've got 3 networks that are the gateway to mental health and well-being. One of them is the default mode network. It is the mind wandering away from the present, going to the future, thinking about the future, generating some anxiety, going back to the past, revisiting old memories, old trauma, giving you emotional pain. And so that wandering mind is the default mode network. And this book, this is not an academic book about facts. This is a book to help you actually experience and discover your default mode network, because when you come to discover and learn, truly learn how your brain works, what you're using in that learning process, you're turning on one of the 7 networks called central executive network. That central executive, that is your observing mind. When, I don't know if you've ever done mindfulness or prayer, but what you do in those is you observe your state as it is. You observe your addiction. You observe your depression. That is the central executive that's on. And it turns out, and this is at the core of all religions, that when you build that observing mind and you come to observe your default mode network for what it is, you shut it off. And that is the secret to overcoming addiction. It is coming to really experience your default mode network and realize that it has been the driver of your problems, not the real you, which is your higher self, your central executive. So this book, what it does, it breaks down these knots, 11 knots, in a very systematic way, starting off with stress. Stress and what is stress, how stress is damaging our lives. Number 2, emotional pain, and number 3, addictive craving. They're presented in a particular order, which we can get into. But so that is the default mode network. It's your wandering mind, essentially.
beautiful. And it is nearly a disease, a hidden nefarious something that has seeped into our minds, and it's increasingly utilized by other powers. And with that, I don't mean foreign powers such as a government, although they play their roles too. No, it is. I'm talking about the issues of our advertisements of the type of media that we like to consume, the success of TikTok, the success of Instagram, this immediate satisfaction, this immediate, very highly addictive scrolling likes. I post something and immediately check how many likes I get for it. You get dopamine surges, all that. So what we have seen in recent years is that exactly advertisement agencies and institutions have harnessed those networks and have figured out, okay, that's how it works. Now we can create products that are highly, highly addictive and make shitloads of money out of it.
Yep,
Hey,
that's right. Absolutely. Well, so yeah, in addiction in particular, you've got two parts of the brain that hijack the brain and take control. One of them is the default mode network. It's the wandering mind. It goes back to the past and back and to the future. It can create stress, depression, anxiety. And then you've got a second part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens. It's the pleasure center. It's what releases dopamine. And when those two parts of the brain take over, what you have is anytime your mind wanders, goes back to the past, to some emotional trauma from childhood, gives you some stress, has some anxiety. And the way you cope with that, if you cope with that by pursuing dopamine, pleasure as a way of overcoming that stress, that's how addiction takes hold. Addiction starts with good intentions, right? Going out for some ice cream after a stressful week, there's nothing wrong with that. A glass of wine, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you come to rely on that pleasure as a way of coping with stress, that's when addictive craving takes over, where that craving is harmful. And so distinguishing between a good craving and a harmful craving, that's the key. But unfortunately, like you said, a lot of big corporations are taking advantage and basically getting people addicted to information. So the average person uses their smartphone 4 hours a day, and it's tied to high levels of anxiety, poor performance at work and school, sleep disturbances, and all kinds of other health and mental problems.
So true. So true. But yet it is actually something that is being normalized and even celebrated. Hey, look, I only need 4 hours. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Look at me. I'm the man. Yeah, right. We are creating this society of sick people. And the proof lies in the figures. If you just look at obesity, the incidence of obesity and morbid obesity has increased to beyond 50% in the United States. And it's just a 10% increase in just 10 years. If you look at that as one example, my goodness, we are talk about emotional overeating, supersizing, all those things. Talk about dopamine, talk about food addictions that are really, there is not someone pouring fuel in the fire. They're putting aviation fuel in it. Okay. So here we are. And if you're thinking, oh, well, I'm not an addict. Well, I'm sorry. Let me break it to you, dear audience. 1 in 4 of us, at least, some people say 1 in 3, have got chemical addiction, are chemically addicted. If we then add the other addictions, such as the food, such as the gambling, such as sex, pornography, and other addictions, boy, oh boy, humanity is a bit at the brink, I have to say, just from an addiction point of view, leave alone the chance of depression, 1 in 3 for a major depression in your lifetime, etc. We keep going with these figures. Ultimately, if you think, nah, this is really, I don't need to listen to that topic is not for me, I'm sorry to break it to you. I think it is really, really so important that we realize that.
That's right. Absolutely. No. And if you're wondering, am I suffering? I mean, take a look inside. How do you feel inside? Are you at ease? Are you sleeping well? Take a look inside and ask yourself, am I happy? Could I be addicted? Is it possible that I have an addiction to money, to success, to climbing, the corporate ladder or the academic ladder? And so the good news is that this type of pain and suffering we're going through is a tremendous opportunity for transformational change and healing. And so I would recommend, asking yourself, what is your intention? We all have goals. I want to graduate. I want to get a promotion, et cetera, et cetera. But what is your intention of how you want to get there?
Mm.
Do you want to graduate with anxiety, or do you want to graduate with happiness and inner peace, right? A lot of us don't actually set an intention for how we actually want to live. But I think that's the first step. The first step is, what is it you deeply want? And that's step number one. And step number two, self-understanding and self-discovery, and getting at the core of what's driving this addictive craving. Can it be emotional pain from long ago, unresolved? Can it be some stress that you have a hard time preventing? And so this is what the book tries to help you basically navigate. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And you've actually, the things that you've described, whilst we are talking about science, you already alluded to that we are coming closer to a point where we are merging Eastern and Western medicine principles, philosophies, and the insights, those things that we were previously thinking about woo-woo blah over there. Increasingly, we are accepting those things, such as meditation, such as yoga, for example. Yoga now has got specific trauma-focused yoga techniques, where we actually combine very practical physical exercise with a release of the trauma that is sitting in the tissues, that is linked with our immediate past, but also sometimes the past of generations ago. There is so much where we're beginning to realize that things we have frowned upon, certainly in the Western medical community, let's say even 20, 30 years ago, that
Yes.
now there is actually a science behind it. And now we can actually truly see that there are things like functional MRIs and increasing ways how we can actually visualize what is happening within the brain. And there is not one single day passing where there are not new insights. And Hosein, I'm so grateful that you took an interest into that, and your book actually allows us to merge those things, especially for the more allopathic Western medicine oriented people who still consider things like meditation. What is that? We don't need to do that. When in reality, when we actually look deep down into the soul of professors in medicine, you see the alcoholic addictive trait, you see the 2 divorces, you see the poor coping mechanisms, you see the workaholic. These are all things, if you were to look properly behind the white garden fence, very different stories.
Absolutely. This is why I wrote the book. I mean, I am trained in Western medicine. When I was in medical school here in California 2 decades ago, we did not mention spirituality. Mindfulness was not mentioned. Medical school was like going to a plumbing school. Here's find the plug in the plumbing, take it out. It was very simplified. And the brain, back then we just thought this is all chemicals in the brain. There's an imbalance. And so you label someone with a disorder, tell them to take this pill, which does not cure any underlying issue. And that's the way I was trained.
Yep.
But I wrote the book because I'm seeing a transformation happening right now. You mentioned fMRI. We are now actually imaging. We can actually see this default mode network. 2,500 years ago, Buddha said, "Where is the ego? It can't be found." Well, actually, it is found. We found it. It's called the default mode network. You can see it on an fMRI. And we can see that people who suffer from loneliness, they have an overactive default mode network, and they tend to gravitate towards negative stimuli. People with depression, overactive default mode network, they have a hard time being present because they're taken back to the past, to thoughts that I'm not worthy or thoughts of guilt. People with addiction have this default mode network that's overactive. Anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD. We're seeing it in studies. On the other hand, we're also seeing mindfulness exercises shut off the default mode network. They turn on that central executive network. And so do, by the way, psychedelics, which taboo subject, they're illegal here, but they will now soon be legal for certain things like refractory depression. How do psychedelics work? They shut off the default mode network. And now I'm seeing papers about the power of spirituality, the core principles. I'm not talking about being a religious person following a religion, I'm talking about the core spiritual values of compassion, forgiveness. Those qualities cut your stress level. They actually improve your health. They improve recovery after surgery. And I'm seeing this in scientific papers. So it's all coming together, East and West, science and religion, it's all coming together, and it's just the beginning. So I think there's more to come. We no longer have to just suffer as we did in the past. We have all the tools to prevent that suffering, and it's just a start.
Yeah, very right. And that is indeed the principle of functional medicine, where we look at holistically at a patient. And again, this holistically, that sounds sort of, there is some weird kind of negativity attached to it in some circles. Yet when we truly look at it, the only thing that we are saying is that we want to look at a patient as a whole, not in a kind of Larry-fairy tree-hugging way. Although the power of tree-hugging, this could be a whole episode in its own, the power of grounding yourself out there in nature and actually switching off the electronics around you and letting energy flow from natural sources and revitalizing you. That's where nowadays we have got papers who actually demonstrate you going out into nature, you going out for a walk is incredibly positive. Here you go. So again, I guess the Western medicine plays catch up a little bit with some Eastern traditions, and philosophies, etc. So. Right. But better later than never in this particular case. Oh no, it's wonderful. Hosein, where do you think this development will lead us in the future? Do you think that we will be able to harness the various networks, switch them on and off in more efficient ways?
Yes. So what is the quality of living when you're in the default mode network, let's say, versus that central executive? Well, the default mode network, it is like the primitive brain, right? It's what got us through the jungles and the caves and all the famines and predators. It is a reactive, judgmental way of living, centered around me, the storyline of me and I, and what's threatening to me. And so you're going through life constantly with cravings and aversions, up and down, up and down. That's the default mode network way of living. The central executive way of living, it is present. It is present, it is observing. It has an expansive consciousness. It's not too obsessed with me and I because it recognizes that all of life is interrelated. You mentioned the grounding of nature. When you're fully in nature, fully present, your default mode network is off. You're connecting with something bigger than yourself, far bigger than yourself.
Correct.
A deeper power, whether that's Almighty God, whether that's a deeper subconscious, mind of yours that's deeper than your ego. So as we learn to recognize this default mode and switch over to our higher self, I think humanity can take the next step up and save this planet and, move our civilization forward from all this war and whatever the hell it is we're going through here right now, addiction and all of this, and take the next level up. To get there, the rocket fuel we need is all of this pain and suffering. All this pain and suffering we're going through, this is the fuel that will take us to our higher self, to our better self that's yet to come, I think.
That's beautifully said. And I think there are many of us who are on this journey. And certainly when you meet a like-minded traveler, you immediately feel a bond. You feel an aura around this person, because this person has typically gone through darkness, has gone through pain, and is now appreciating the light in such a different way. We don't take our lives for granted. We don't take the light for granted. We live with intention, because we know how easily it is to get lost and to suffer the consequences. It is beautiful, therefore, to see other people like that. And if we recognize each other, it means actually, hang on, there is something about this person. So you are trying to change the people around you by simply modeling a consciously or unconsciously a different way of living. By doing so, will we not be able to influence a small bubble of people around us? And therefore, if there are other people who are doing exactly the same thing, and there's a group of a bubble here, bubble there, bubble there, bubble there, will we not be able to actually make the world a better place? And I strongly believe so. And it doesn't matter which color our skin is, which religion we believe in. I think what we are talking here about is very fundamental issues that affect each and every one of us, regardless of the network within our network of society within which we are living. So wow, Hosein, that is some very good stuff there, and it's beautiful to see all that happening, to see another colleague who is going out there and say, yeah, okay, I wear this hat of Western science, and by the way, let's talk religion, or let's talk, but not in the sense of an extremist kind of view, but in actually let's merge it and let's use the positive influences from all sides. Wow, fantastic. Hosein, you're an amazing man. No two ways around it. I think, where would you like people to go, in the sense of where should they make a start? Because we are talking about this mode network. But having said that, I mean, if someone says, wow, that's all quite cool and I understand what you're saying, but how can I apply that to my life?
Yeah. I think I would, look inside. I would look inside. Are you happy with what you see inside? I mean, a couple of years ago, my journey, it took about 6 months for me to unwind these knots. I call them knots: stress, anxiety, emotional pain. I don't call them disorders or syndromes. They're reversible, like knots in a rope. You can untie it. But a few years ago, when I looked inside, I saw a negative mood all the time, a judgmental mood, a reactive mood, a negative mood. I wasn't happy. I was successful on paper. I had valedictorian, graduated, blah, 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 academic achievements. But inside it was dark. It was, and it was one day, actually, it was one day where I searched nirvana, the term nirvana. What does it actually mean? And I read something that you don't just get there. It doesn't just appear. Yeah. It's an active process. You have to strive for it every day, just as you would strive to run a marathon. You don't just show up at a marathon, start running, and then a mile in, get angry at yourself because your body is weak, right? No, you have to train yourself. You have to prepare yourself. Yeah. It's like planting an orange tree, right? It takes daily effort. You water it, you give it the right soil, and then one day the fruits appear. Yeah. And awakening and nirvana is the same thing. You got to strive for it, aim for it, put in the effort, and one day your mind will awaken. It will blossom. And a lot of the things, Buddha said 2,500 years ago, Jesus said, a lot of the prophets, at the core of it, the core values that they espoused, I think there is truth. That's why they are still alive today, right? And it is maybe the same story we're telling generation after generation. But I think it is important for you to tell your story, for me to tell, and for the thousands of other people who awaken to be a model for others. I think that's how we will awaken as a species, like you said. And so start the journey, start walking and the road appears, right? Rumi says that. Seek and you shall find. Jesus said that. A lot of the prophets say the same thing. Set the intention, stay on there, and when you veered off, recognize it and try to reorient yourself back so you can blossom and awaken, right?
Beautiful, beautiful. And I think there's so many things where we can actually start looking deep inside. And the sheer fact that we pause and look inside and actually start feeling the emotions that are there. That's something new for many of us, to really feel them. Because normally, if there is a negative emotion such as anxiety, we do something about it. We eat something. We do whatever it takes to get away from that pain, to actually stop and feel and allow that feeling to be there. Stay 3 minutes with that feeling and truly, truly appreciate it, which can be horrible when you're feeling is deep existential fear, or really a terror and a panic attack going over you. Normally, we would do anything, and we add in further things because you feel ashamed that you have got a panic attack, or you feel guilty that somehow you are not that Coca-Cola advertisement, young, healthy, vibrant, I'm happy. You've got all these layers of crap coming down. And I think stopping and feeling is the start, and allow it. And actually,
Yeah. What happens when you stop and feel, let's say, some old pain or some anxiety, when you actually stop and observe it and experience it? When you're observing it, when you watch it come and it hurts and it's painful, and after a few minutes you watch it die down and go, you've turned on your observing mind. You've turned on that higher power. And that observing mind, you can grow it, just like as you could train your muscles. You can train that observing mind. How? There are things like insight meditation, vipassana, forms of mindfulness, where you spend 5 or 10 minutes deepening your focus, deepening your observing power. And initially it might be like a small, tiny candle, but you practice and you cultivate this thing, and pretty soon it's a high beam. And any thought that comes, you can observe, you watch it come and you watch it go. Now it takes some time to get there. But what you just said, I mean, there's a term called radical acceptance, and there are forms of therapy that are based on just accepting and observing people who have fear of flights, right? They can work with a therapist, cognitive behavioral therapy, and undo all of that and come to recognize it as an irrational fear. So you can do this with a therapist, you can do it on your own, but that insight meditation, coming to observe yourself, look for craving, look for aversion, look for negativity and judgmental thinking. Wait for it to come, observe it, and allow it to go. That is the exercise. The more you do that, the stronger your observing mind comes, and you can break through to a much happier place.
Beautifully said, isn't it? Yeah. I think there is so much to learn. But having said that, you don't just come up with these concepts. You need to essentially study them. And that sounds like hard work, but you need to practice them. Maybe study is the wrong word, practice. And it's actually whatever you start, any new skill you try, you need to really perform it again and again and again. And initially it will be hard, and then it will become easier, easier, easier. So there's definitely, again, a journey waiting for you. They say for a new skill, to be a new movement that you learn, for example, in a sport, you need to do 300 perfect repetitions, and you need to do 3,000 perfect repetitions to undo a bad habit. So just interesting figures. So don't expect one try of meditation and you think, oh yeah, that's beautiful. Oh no, but then all the world comes back and is as negative as ever. Okay, I congratulate you. I want to celebrate this win with you, because you have done more than you would have done in the past. You have actually given it a shot. And the journey starts with putting one foot ahead. You've just done that. So congratulations. So instead of saying, oh, well, I'm a failure because I have not been enlightened. No, you actually have made a start of a journey. And that is beautiful. And we're so bad in expecting immediate satisfaction. This is not a journey like that. Sorry, there are no little high sugar content, high sugar fructose little things at every step. No immediate satisfaction. Sorry, guys. But
it's not. But I do want to say, the time you put into it will return to you tenfold. not immediately, but down the road, every single minute that you
Mm.
put into mindfulness, into prayer, into
Yeah.
observing yourself and understanding will ultimately return back to you. It doesn't happen overnight, but I remember starting off several years ago with mindfulness and just getting through only a few seconds. And then it turned into a few minutes. And then I was able to get through the exercise by being mostly mindful. And then fast forward a couple years later and applying that mindfulness to my daily life and recognizing, wow, every time I brush my teeth in the morning, my default mode network switches on and I immediately go back into the past, and coming to really understand, wow, this default mode network is a big driver of all of my problems. Anytime you observe that wandering mind and snap yourself out of it and become present, that is strengthening your observing mind. And it builds momentum on its own, like a snowball. It just builds momentum. And so the initial part, very difficult. It's like walking through a desert. You're parched, you're thirsty. It's hard to get through. And then you see this desert rose. It's beautiful. It motivates you to go on. And then you start seeing more plants, and it just builds momentum on its own. This is the journey, right? And only you can take this journey. I can't take this journey for you. We can guide you on the journey, but you have to take your own journey. Nobody else can take it.
Oh, that's very well said. Hosein, you're an amazing man. It's lovely to see this beautiful insight and the marriage of Eastern and Western principles. That is the future. There's no two ways around that. And the sooner society, individuals within society, leaders within society begin to incorporate these principles, I think the sooner we have a far more empowered society that can truly lead to change in the better way, not just following the newest media crap or the realizing the amount of manipulation that we undergo in a daily life called advertising. Let that be for political power, for food, for alcohol, for whatever else there is. The moment we actually stop and listen to ourselves and investigate and be curious about our minds, you will soon realize that there is something within you that has a lot of really cool answers. And these answers, if you believe in a deity, in a God, maybe God is speaking to you actually through that executive mind. If you believe in wider energy, that's fine. So as we said earlier, this is not limited to any religion or limited to any kind of belief systems. I think there's a lot of power in your mind, and it's just waiting to give you the right answers. We're just not used to ask ourselves and then wait to hear the answers that are coming, and listen to these answers and try to figure out, okay, is that a procrastinator, or is that the inner critic, or is that actually the true inner me who says, actually, you should do X? And that's, again, you need to practice that.
You
Wow.
nailed it. Wow. So I wanted to highlight, because what you just said is at the core of the chapter on addictive craving. How do you overcome addictive craving? The first step is it's the process of surrendering this ego, the nucleus accumbens that has taken over, admitting, unfortunately for many people, it's hitting rock bottom, but you can surrender before you hit rock bottom. Surrendering is just coming to the realization that this is not working. This addiction to food and constantly the ups and downs of wanting nicotine and money, it's not bringing me satisfaction. Making another $1 million is not making me happy. Just surrender the ego. You surrender it. I need something else. And a lot of people, unfortunately, after they surrender, they go right back into the addiction. But the way to go towards the light is by relying on those insights, what you just said. relying on that higher power. There is a higher power that will lead you out of that darkness.
Yeah.
Maybe those insights come from God, like you said, for religious people. Maybe it comes from deep in your central executive, your subconscious mind. The answers will appear. The road will appear. You have to allow them to come. But just, you've got to surrender this addiction and this ego that's trapping you, basically. There's an interesting story. There was a guy at the University of Cambridge, graduate student. He was trying to solve the Sanskrit code. So there was this long time ago, thousands of years ago, these old linguists had put the Sanskrit code for the language of Sanskrit. And it was this riddle for thousands of years. And this graduate student looked at it for a couple of months. He just gave up. He's like, I can't do this. I'm going to take a break. He went for a month. He meditated. He centered himself. And he went back, to Cambridge, looked at the code, and the answer was right there. His deeper mind had solved it. His subconscious mind had solved it and given him that insight. Our deeper subconscious mind is so powerful. It will give you the insights to become successful. You just have to be willing to listen. St. Augustine said, God provides the wind, but man must raise his sails. The insights will come, but you have to be ready to act when they come and listen to them. So anyway, what you said just really resonated with me.
If you look at chemistry, the benzene ring, which is just a chemical structure, and the chemist who realized what the chemical structure is, he was facing a very similar thing. He couldn't figure out what is happening here. And then one night in his dream, he saw a snake biting its tail. And then he woke up and thought, bingo, I have got, now this is how it must be. And indeed, so our brain, and there are thousands of stories like that out there. And I actually get goosebumps, really, because it's the power of our imagination that is so beautiful. And if you think about it, we all have got X amount of seconds in the day, but some of us are just more in tune with our body. Therefore, we can be more creative. Therefore, there are people out there who dream up concepts that are futuristic for most people. And then you wait 5 years and then it's in every household, whatever that may be. But it's those people who are where you think, wow, where do you get those ideas from? Well, these are probably the people who are far more living intentionally and who are far more practiced in letting the brain come up with the right answers.
Yes.
Which
My
also,
theory, yeah, go ahead.
Which also means that we are actually able to practice that and actually cultivate that. So it's not this, you shouldn't be envious about people who are incredibly productive in a really beautiful way. You should ask yourself, okay, which questions do they ask themselves? Which practices do they have? And surprise, surprise, there's probably quite a mindfulness chapter, part of them.
Yes. My hypothesis is that when you are in that central executive network, and there are some people who maybe they're like this from birth or they've learned to be present, it's called, here in the States, we call it being in the zone or being in the flow state. When you're fully present and there is no mental chatter, there is no doubt, the default mode network isn't taking you to the past and future and having you swamped in addiction. But the people who can learn to be in that zone, the insights come to them. And I believe every one of us, every listener here, has the power to get closer to that central executive. This isn't something that certain people are born with. I think every single one of us has the ability to learn to live in that central executive by quieting the default mode, by learning about their brains and having the intention of wanting to be in the zone, whether that's to be a great athlete or to have the deepest mindfulness exercises or to be a very spiritual person, whatever it is. I think each of us has that potential to be in the zone if we want, only if we want.
Beautiful. Hosein, you're an amazing man. Thank you very much for being a guest on my show. Thank you very much for enlightening me, literally, actually. So I'm very, very grateful. It's always good to see that you are on the right path, because there's always this inner critic and sort of all those kind of voices there that make you wonder, should we not do something else? Well, in reality, no. Thank you. I'm grateful to you for reinforcing for me that the path that I'm on is likely to bring me to a more advanced state of living. And for that, I'm very grateful. And if people really have gelled with what you are saying and want to know more about you, where can they find you?
Absolutely. The website for the book is yourdefaultmode.com, just a single word. And all of my, social media links are there on the bottom. And the book you can find on Amazon. I think Amazon Australia, I believe there is a version there, or Apple Books as well. And Stephan, it's an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate what you're doing and how you're helping people as well. Very, very important. So thank you.
Absolutely. You guys out there, look after yourself and live with intention. Hey, bye.
Bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.